We have with us Dr. Helané Wahbeh, who will talk about What Survives Death, a survey of people's beliefs, presenting a descriptive study involving the participants' beliefs about the afterlife. Dr. Wahbeh is a director of research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at Oregon Health and Science University. She is also the incoming president of the Parapsychological Association. And now we will begin the presentation.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with you today to share with you about What Survives Death, a survey of people's beliefs. So today we find ourselves in a world that is facing unprecedented challenges with COVID, with prejudice and systemic racism and rampant fear and divisiveness. These experiences affect each one of us, requiring us to choose how we will respond. Are we separate, disconnected from our neighbors, from people on the other side of the world? Our premise at IONS, where I'm the director of research, is that everything is interconnected. And when we embody that awareness, this reveals information and energy from beyond time and space, which in turn profoundly amplifies our well-being. This vision of our inherent interconnectedness offers us a hopeful way forward. And so one way we look at this interconnectedness is through the study of consciousness in the numerous studies that we and others have done, demonstrating that consciousness is non-local and is not limited to our physical brain and our conventional notions of time and space. We see this evidence in numerous studies we and others have done on remote viewing, telepathy, psychokinesis. And so does this non-locality of consciousness that we observe while we're alive persist after our body's physical death? If our consciousness is non-local, then couldn't that non-locality continue to exist after the body dies? Religions and cultures around the world have long-standing beliefs in an afterlife that are foundational aspects of their faiths, from our major world religions to most indigenous cultures. These beliefs about what happened in the afterlife affects how we deal with the deaths of friends and family, and our attitudes about our own death and how we live our lives. So today I'd like to share with you about a study that we conducted about what people believe actually survives after death, and if their childhood and current religious and spiritual affiliations predict those beliefs. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that this is a very large topic and that there have been volumes of books that have been written about it, collating the evidence and attitudes about beliefs. So today I'll just be touching on one small piece of it. So what survives? Death is obviously something all humans face. It's probably the only thing that is common to all of us so consistently. It's an inevitable fact of all of our physical lives. And religions and cultures teach what happens to us after we die. Comparative religious studies also say that there's many similarities about what people are taught from these sources. Many might say that it is a matter of faith or belief to trust what our religious or spiritual traditions teach us about the afterlife. People in more shamanistic traditions might say that our ideas about the afterlife are not just beliefs, but that are taught, but that they are actual lived experiences, direct experiences. Shamanic practitioners journey to the lower and upper worlds, and these journeys for them are not just imaginations of the mind, but real places that their consciousness can visit, and thus proof that they exist. Others feel like they need a different type of proof there's so much evidence, volumes written about this from experimental and philosophical perspectives, from reincarnation, near-death experiences, after-death communications, apparitions, evidential mediumistic communications. Many of these experiences can't be explained through traditional means. And of course, we also have the debate between living agent psi versus survival as an attempt to explain the evidence. And this debate is likely unsolvable, unreconcilable. Of course, our spiritual and religious teachings can share with us what happens after our body dies, and we can learn about any evidence that there might be from research of an afterlife. But what do people actually believe about it, regardless of their upbringing, teachings, and the evidence? In 2011, a poll of over 18,000 people from 23 countries around the world was done on people's beliefs in the afterlife. Over half said that they believed in some form of afterlife. 1/4 believed in the afterlife, but not specifically in a heaven or hell. 2 in 10 believe that you go to heaven or hell. Another 7 believe that you are ultimately reincarnated, and 2% believe in heaven but not hell. And 1/4 said you simply cease to exist. And another 1/4 said they just weren't sure what happens. So we wanted to find out more about not just if people believed if they survived, but what part of us, if any, survives our physical death. Is it our personality, memory, thoughts, emotions, soul, nothing, or something else completely? And if our consciousness does survive, does it remain indefinitely, or does it change over time or merge with something larger, or does something else entirely happen? Of course, religious and spiritual traditions have much to say on this topic, but we wanted to know what individuals believed. And, much evidential type of research is focused on personal survival, meaning that it is our personality, our distinct traits, memories, and emotions are sustained at least by some of us for some unknown period of time. And so perhaps there is some continuity after death that is recognizable. And we see this in our mediumistic experiments, where we try to identify personalities that still persist. So what survives? Our survey. So we did a survey using SurveyMonkey, and the main question that we asked the participants are, what are your thoughts on what will happen to you after your physical body dies? And we gave the participants some definitions because obviously there's some assumptions built into this. So in the answer items, we use the word I or me. And when we use that, we ask them to understand that that's referring to their everyday sense of self, including their personality, memory, thoughts, and experiences. And the term soul refer to the concept of an eternal non-physical essence of who you are, which is related to but separable from your body. And so this question, what are your thoughts on what will happen to you after your physical body dies, had a number of different responses. So they could check as many as they wanted to. And the answer choices were, I believe that I no longer exist in any form. I will remain conscious in some form for eternity. I will remain conscious in some form for some limited period of time. Something will remain conscious, but not what I presently consider to be me. I will recognize that myself is far greater, more aware or expansive than I had previously imagined. I will be absorbed into a higher self or multidimensional self or oversoul. What was once me will dissolve into an ocean of consciousness or pure awareness. We also had my soul will survive because it was never physical in the first place. I'm an illusion created by the body, so I will disappear. Some sort of energy presently within me will continue after my death, but it won't be what I currently think of as me. Some aspects of my existence will be recorded in space-time, and some people will be able to sense it. And nothing will happen to my soul because there are no souls. Or I will discover that I am part of a computer-like simulation, like in the movie The Matrix. So that was the first question. The other component we asked about is about, okay, something will survive, but what will that I, where will that I go, or what will that I do? And so we separated that into a separate question. And so the responses for this were, I will go nowhere because no part of me will survive physical death. I will go to heaven or hell, depending on my life deeds. I will go to heaven. I will go to hell. I will go to purgatory. I will go to the Bardo regions. I will exist everywhere as part of pure awareness. Then we had a few items about reincarnation. I will reincarnate immediately into another human or other earthly being. I will reincarnate at some point into another earthly being who lives in the past or the future. I will reincarnate into another being, not necessarily on this planet, who lives in the past or the future. And I will reincarnate into another being, but only if I choose to. Then there were another few items about ghosts. I will remain indefinitely on Earth as a spirit or as an energy that can interact with living people and spirits. I will remain on Earth as a spirit or energy that can interact with people until resolved conflicts are satisfied. And I will move on to another realm, but will be able to access the earthly realm under some circumstances. So those are the answer choices for our two main questions. We also looked at a number of predictors, potential predictors, paranormal beliefs and experiences, childhood and current religious and spiritual affiliations, and a variety of demographics. So getting into the results now, for the recruitment, the inclusion criteria were English-speaking adults, and they had to answer at least one afterlife question. We recruited from ION's members, Craigslist, our newsletters, and social media postings, and data was collected from July 28th, 2020 through March 21st, 2021. For people interested in the statistics, we did logistic regression models for each of the items. So each item for each question was binary. And so for what happens to me, we had 13 models. And where do I go or do had 14 models. We did correct for multiple comparisons. And so the p-values listed there are the corrected p-values, which were the threshold to be considered significant. And we included potential predictors into each of those 27 models. We had a goodness of fit test, which indicated good fit, and the results are reported as odds ratios. So over almost 2,500 people began the survey. We had some exclusions, some for being too young, some who didn't answer any of the afterlife questions, and we had 12 people who did the survey more than once. The participants' average age was 52 plus or minus 16 years. They were pretty well split by gender, but a little bit more females. There were generally well educated, 16 plus years of education. And again, pretty well split in terms of relationship status, with more being in relationship. Mostly Caucasian, with about 20% being diverse racial or ethnic groups. And we had respondents from 65 different countries. Most of the participants were from the US, some from UK and then Canada, and then a smattering of people from 62 other different countries. We have a wide net of people that we recruit from when we put out to our newsletter. These are the averages for paranormal beliefs and experiences. This is on scales that go from 0 to 100. So paranormal belief was quite high in the top quartile, and paranormal experiences was a little bit more than the midline point. In terms of childhood and current religious and spiritual affiliation, what you will notice here is that Christian was the most endorsed during childhood, followed by spiritual but not religious, and then by none. And for this survey, we actually allowed people to pick more than one religious or spiritual affiliation. From our previous surveys, we often find that there's not just a black and white one specific answer for these. So we allowed people to check more than one. And you'll notice a shift in the current affiliation. So rather than having most be Christian, most were spiritual but not religious, with Christian being the second most endorsed, and then the agnostic. So in terms of the results, looking at our first question, people on average checked 2.8 plus or minus 2.2 items with a range of 0 to 13. About 1,400 people chose more than one item. So that means about 1,000 just chose one. 386 people also completed a text field. Of those, 144 had not checked any other answer. So they didn't pick any of the binary items. They just put in an answer into the other. Of those of those text answers, 43 of them were some version of I don't know. Here's an example of one of those text answers. I will move into a realm in a transitional way, perhaps to see that those who are left behind are okay, or perhaps to make peace with my departure from this recent life. And when I'm ready, I will move on into another earthly being by means of reincarnation, and from there I will progress as I'm ready to. So there were some pretty descriptive answers of what people believed happened to me. So when we look at each of the items, these are listed in order of how many people chose them, with the most endorsed at the top. So what you'll notice here are the top 3 endorsed items. The top one was, I will recognize that myself is far greater, more aware, or expansive than I had previously imagined. Then my soul will survive because it was never physical in the first place. And then I will remain conscious in some form for eternity. The ones that did not believe in some sort of afterlife were, I will no longer exist in any form, and about 7.5% of the people chose that, and nothing will happen to my soul because there are no souls was at about 3.2%. So it's really interesting to see the order and who, how many people endorsed these specific items. Looking at the logistic regression and what the predictors are, so there were 22 significant odds ratios out of these models. Paranormal belief was actually a significant predictor in many of the different items. So there were a number of items where higher paranormal belief increased the odds of checking the items, suggesting that something survived. So this one, H2, sorry, H2, H5, H6, H8, and H11. So higher paranormal beliefs increase the odds of checking those items. Higher paranormal beliefs decrease the odds of checking items suggesting that nothing survived. So H1, H9, and H12. So that was quite interesting. Paranormal experiences decrease the odds of checking H5 and H8. So if you had more paranormal experiences, you are less likely to check those two items. In terms of religious and spiritual affiliation, there were no childhood affiliations that were predictors, which is quite fascinating. There were current religious and spiritual affiliations that were. So Christianity increased the odds of endorsing H2 and H8. Spiritual but not religious increased the odds of H5, 6, 7, and 10. Being Buddhist increased the odds of H7, 9, and 10. And being atheist increased the odds of H12. Many of these make sense in terms of when you read the items and see the odds. For example, nothing will happen to my soul because there are no souls. Being currently atheist had a 5.1 odds ratio for choosing that. So that makes sense as an atheist. And, you know, let's see another big one here. Christianity, 2.5 increased odds of I will remain conscious in some form for eternity. So now let's talk about the next question. Where do I go and what do I do? People chose on average 1.7 plus or minus 1.5 items with a range of 0 to 14, and 944 people chose more than one item for this question. If we look at how many people endorsed each of the items, the top three were I will move on to another realm, but we'd be able to access the earthly realm under some circumstances was the most endorsed, followed by I will exist everywhere as part of pure awareness. And then 300 people less than that chose I will reincarnate into another being, but only if I choose to. So those top two were actually the most endorsed, followed by that one reincarnation item. The least endorsed were I will go to purgatory and I will go to hell at 1.8%, and 0.4% actually chose those. Also interesting to note that the three reincarnation items were between 15 and 28% of the people chose a reincarnation item. So when we look at the potential predictors, there were 28 significant odd ratios. Again, this is after correction for multiple comparisons. There was only one demographic that was a predictor in this question. And actually, just to highlight, there were no demographics that were predictors for the previous question. So in this question, increased age was associated with decreased odds for G2, G5, G7, G11, and G12. You'll see those are highlighted in turquoise. So what this means is that for every 1 point increase in age, there was a 0.95 to 0.98 fold decrease in the odds of the participant checking these 5 items. That is, the older the person is, the less likely they believe that they would go to heaven or hell, go to purgatory, reincarnate immediately into another human or earthly being, remain indefinitely on earth as a spirit or energy, interacting with people or until unresolved conflicts were satisfied. So that's an interesting piece about age. Paranormal beliefs, again, was a predictor for this question, with higher paranormal beliefs increasing the odds of endorsing reincarnation or remaining on Earth as a spirit, and decreasing the odds of I will go nowhere because no part of me will survive physical death. Paranormal experiences was not significant, not a significant predictor for this, like we saw in the previous one. It was just paranormal beliefs. So here we see the only significant childhood spiritual religious affiliation in all of our analysis, which was Buddhism, which increased the odds of someone choosing I will go to heaven or hell depending on my life deeds. Being agnostic increased the odds of choosing I will remain indefinitely on earth as a spirit or energy that can interact with living people or spirits. Being an atheist increased the odds of endorsing I will go nowhere because no part of me will survive physical death. Being Buddhist increased the odds of I will go to the Bardo regions. Being Christian increased the odds of going to heaven or hell, going to heaven, going to purgatory, and remaining on earth and interacting with people until conflicts are resolved. Being Hindu was a predictor for reincarnating immediately. Being Islamic was also a predictor for going to heaven or hell, depending on my life deeds. Being pagan was a predictor for going nowhere. And being spiritual and not religious was a predictor for a number of items. One, decreasing the odds of G2, which is the heaven or hell item, and increasing the odds for a number of them, G9, G10, G13, and 14. So looking at all of this information, the general belief is that personal self does transcend time and space and survives physical death, that the personal self is not limited to the physical form. 25 to 33% believe that something survives, but not as a personal self. And very few respondents did not believe in some type of survival. Paranormal beliefs was a significant predictor in 16 of the 27 logistical models. And paranormal experiences was not as predictive. Age was only predictive in the where do I go or do items, but not in the what happens to me. And the other demographics were not as predictive. Being Christian was the most predictive religious affiliation, and Buddhism was the only predictive childhood religious affiliation. This is really interesting because from our sample, it seems like it's less about how you were raised and more about what you currently believe in terms of your beliefs in the afterlife. And being Hindu only predicted one of the 3 reincarnation questions rather than all 3 of them. So there are a few unique things about this survey. We allowed more than one response. So people weren't forced to choose one belief. They could choose as many as they wanted. And they didn't have to choose just one affiliation. They could choose as many as they wanted. I think this is a useful way to do it because it reflects the diversity of our world today. One limitation of this survey is that it was a convenient sample in terms of who we polled, and this is a limitation that should be considered when thinking about the results. And obviously it's biased because only people who are interested in this topic are going to be the ones who took it. And in terms of future studies, we think it's important to continue looking at these questions and separating and perhaps going more deeply into separating where the self goes and what, if anything, the self does when it gets there. So a quick shout out to the Society for Psychical Research, whose call for chapters in their new book inspired this survey, is their Life After Death Arguments, Theories, and Evidence. So you can look for the publication of that soon. Thank you for your time, and I'm now will answer your questions.